Hello everyone and welcome to the back room. Despite being something of a joke at launch and an oddity by any measure since, there are enough Amstrad PPC luggables around to ensure they're readily available and not very expensive when they do appear for sale. I owned a PPC640 soon after they became available. It came to me in a swap with some repaired Walters XT compatible boards. And at the time, I liked it because it had a fast 2400 baud modem and I paired the computer with an amber screen for accessing bulletin boards. The one you see here is not that machine, unfortunately. I'm ashamed to say that I got sick of lugging around a luggable and put it in the bin sometime in the early 2000s. I know, but back then no one thought that the PPC would ever become interesting. We live and learn. Frankly, I always rather liked Amstrad's Ugly Duckling, and a quick search of YouTube will produce lots of interesting and useful upgrades. This particular example came from eBay and cost £25. It's complete with a manual, a tatty carrying case and several random 3.5-inch discs, but there's no power supply. Now, I could make one, of course. The original is a simple affair rated at 13 volts DC at 1.9 amps with a centre positive barrel jack. I could use a bench power supply, or I could go off to Poundland and buy 20,000 C-size batteries which should power it for around 20 minutes. There is, though, an alternative. And it's an alternative I've yet to see on YouTube, and that is using the 14-pin proprietary monitor port at the rear of the machine for the purpose intended. Yes, remarkably, the designers at Amstrad equipped the PPC with the marvellous ability to accept power from the mono and colour monitors intended for the company's earliest PC compatible range, while using these screens as an alternative display to the built-in LCD. Now, the LCD isn't actually too bad, but because it isn't backlit, it is quite difficult to make anything out on this screen. The monitors for the earlier machines for the PC compatibles are designated PCMD, PCCD and the PCECD. That is a mono display, a colour display and an enhanced colour display, and each has a built-in power supply intended to power its host computer. The 14-pin port is often mentioned by vintage enthusiasts, but rarely, if ever, used and often misunderstood, and you can find it on the back of the machine here. And here it is, Mon DC in. So if you have one of the aforementioned monitors from the PC compatible desktop machines, it will power the PPC, and also you can use that monitor as a display, an alternative display for this machine. Now, it so happens that I have a PC1512 and also a PC1640, each complete with a screen, one with a PCMD and the other with the PCCD. Someday I'll upgrade the PPC's LCD screen for a modern backlit colour example, but for now let's see what it was like to own one of these machines back in the day and pair it with a monitor from the same stable. So here are the two screens that I own from the PC1512 and the PC1640. This colour monitor came from the 1512. This mono monitor came from the 1640. Now, you may notice, or eagle-eyed viewers will notice, that this one is actually designated PCCM rather than CD, and it's an earlier incarnation which pairs only with the PC1512. So while it has its 14-pin power connector here, to connect to the machine, it has an 8-pin proprietary DIN plug. If we look at the mono monitor, it too has the 14-pin power plug, but this now has, for the 1640, it now has a standard 9-pin D-sub CGA. Now, unfortunately, the signals on this plug are not quite as a standard CGA. In fact, it uses a composite sync. So while the monitor will power the PPC, it can't display anything on it unless I build an adapter, which frankly, for a few novelty moments of connecting the two together, is unlikely. So it's onward to the PCMD. Except that, having no sooner said the word unlikely, I dug out a 9-pin D-sub, an 8-pin female DIN, and I cobbled together this. It's not pretty, I'll grant you, but I couldn't resist having a quick try. However, despite configuring the signals from plug to socket in several ways, I didn't get anything at all on the screen. I seem to remember reading somewhere that the monitor does not switch on unless it is connected to the Amstrad PC, which is weird because it readily powers the PPC even though it won't actually display a signal. I suspect the truth lies hidden somewhere in the bank of switches that must be set correctly to drive an external monitor, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So now it really is onto the mono PCMD screen. To drive an external CRT, the PPC must be set up correctly, and that is done with a series of switches which are located on the left hand side. It's just here. Google these switches and you'll read many different opinions about how to set them up, but they're actually quite straightforward. First thing to know is that despite there being 6 switches, only 5 are used. The 6th, reading left to right, is reserved. So to use an external CRT, set switch 1 to up. Switch 2 selects between MDA and CGA, up for the former and down for the latter. Switch 3 selects an external graphics card, leave it in the down position. Switches 4 and 5 work in combination to select EGA or VGA, 40 column CGA, 80 column CGA and MDA in 80 columns. Here then I have the switches set to drive an external mono monitor working in MDA 80 columns. Let's plug it in, switch it on, boot the machine and see what happens. So to connect up the monitor, reach around to the rear of the machine. Let's just close up this keyboard for a moment. Reach around to the rear of the machine and pull down the flap. The power connector connects here, and CGA connector, if I can get it to reach. Time to boot. Now, after powering on the monitor, we can see that the PPC has come alive as well. We've got please wait on the screen. I'll just pop in a boot disk, and there we are. It's sending its output to the PCMD monitor. So it might be nice to try some MDA games. Oh, here we are playing a pretty good version of Pac Gal in this case in MDA. Not bad. Let's try something else. And if you didn't want to waste all day playing MDA games, let's try doing some word processing. Now, interestingly, although the PCMD monitor is mono and works in MDA mode with the PPC, it is in fact Hercules compatible. It will actually display up to a Hercules resolution. Unfortunately, the PPC external monitor is set by the switches on the side, and it's switched between CGA and MDA. So although we could attempt to boot Microsoft Flight Simulator. So if we select Hercules here, demo mode, don't want to log the flight time. It won't actually display Flight Simulator correctly because PPC is sending an output that is MDA compatible to this monitor. And there we are. Although Flight Simulator is running quite happily, in fact, we're simply getting a lot of characters and garbage on the screen. One interesting attribute of having a monitor alongside the PPC and plugged into it is that by setting scroll lock to on and pressing the right control key, the output will switch to and fro from the monitor, the external monitor, to the LCD and back again quite happily, which could be really useful, but it's having no obvious effect other than as a novelty in this particular case, unfortunately. So I hope you can see from this that by connecting up one of the original Amstrad CRTs to the PPC, it will not only power it but also display the output from the PPC, and you can switch to and fro with the LCD. Thank you for watching everyone, and I will see you again very soon in the back room.